There comes a point when something in pop culture wildly exceeds its own image and becomes unbelievably more popular than ever originally intended. Hello Kitty, Rick and Morty, Jack Skellington, all examples of when a simple property almost becomes godlike in mainstream culture. Look at most mega icons of fictional media and analyze them in their original context and ask yourself if you could ever have imagined a time where that thing was just that thing and not the pseudo-religious icon that it has become today. There was once a time where Star Wars was simply just one nerdy guy's dorky little movie idea about space wizards with light swords. No franchise, no video games, no spin-off cartoons, no marketing, no decades-long billion-dollar global tycoon. I mean, maybe that was a thought, but to the extent that it is now, because back then, really not even a sequel had been thought of. Just a 2-hour movie about a wimpy little kid in space. Pikachu was originally just a Pokemon, just a fat little mouse you had the option to catch early on in the game. Then a show was made based off those games, made Pikachu the starter for the main character, tweaked the design to make him look a little more appealing, and blessed it with the delicate vocals of Ikui Otani, and boom, Pikachu becomes as big as Mickey fucking Mouse. Look at how much aura surrounds Heath Ledger's Joker. If you actually go back and look, Heath Ledger was only in that movie for a fifth of the runtime. That's not a whole lot. See, the point that I'm getting at is what makes something so iconic? The appeal of the design, its allure, its charm, the impression it leaves. Honestly, it's all of that and quite a whole lot more. I don't know exactly how or what, but I'm fascinated at this concept of how something so minuscule and simple can transmute itself through culture to be such a dominating force of capital and entertainment. How many people do you see wearing Wu-Tang and Nirvana logos on a t-shirt and probably couldn't even name you a single song that they've ever done? That topic of psychology could be investigated for a lifetime, but I'm not really here to discuss it to that extent. And you're probably wondering why I titled this video Sephiroth Syndrome. I think Sephiroth is a perfect, in a nutshell, example of how pop culture can entirely change a character from its original context into something more hollow and thoughtless. Final Fantasy VII is a pretty long game, approximately 20 to 30 hours for the main story, at least to a casual player. It can easily go upwards of 60 hours if you really want to get the extras, and even over 100 if you really want to 100% everything. But if you haven't played Final Fantasy VII, you probably know one single thing about the game, and that's Sephiroth. You know he's this mystical, ethereal being who's enraptured in evil and darkness, who will stop at nothing to bring despair and pain into his enemies, and of course you know his iconic orchestral theme song brimming with an angelic chorus. That's not exactly what Sephiroth was. See, of these initial 20 to 30 hours of base story gameplay, Sephiroth was barely even present. The entire first 5 hours of the game, you hardly even hear his name so much as murmured by another character. Once his presence has become known, a lot of the game is spent chasing Sephiroth, but he's not concerned with the main party, or anyone really. He didn't want to drag Cloud into darkness or any weird villainy stuff like that. He wanted to become the planet. And not like in a metaphorical sense, like he wanted to gain world power, and he literally, and I mean the actual textbook definition of the word literal, he literally wanted to become the planet. It sounds crazy, I know. It's pretty cool and interesting when you gotta play the fucking game. But throughout the duration of the game, his presence was scarce, yet impact was always imminent and everlasting. It's really just that he had a great design, charismatic dialogue, and a persona that was as threatening as it was tantalizing. Years would go by, and the imagery and themes surrounding Sephiroth became synonymous with his character, therefore making them nostalgic signifiers for his presence in something. His original theme song was a song called Those Chosen by the Planet. It's a much more sinister and spine-shivering tune, echoed every time he showed up. One-Winged Angel, the iconic, hellish, whimsical, orchestral theme that you always hear every time he's in anything, was never actually his theme song to begin with. It was just the final boss battle music. But it was just that good and highly regarded of a song that it quickly assumed that spot of being his theme song, because it became synonymous with him and the nostalgia for him. It wouldn't be long after that any other piece of media Sephiroth was plunged into, there was a sort of list of boxes to check off and appease the nostalgia of old fans, as well as cater to the new fans and show off his cool elements. So in order to appease the nostalgia of old fans, whilst catering to the new ones, you can only do so much but just show off his cool elements. Take his appearance in something like Advent Children or Kingdom Hearts. At this point, it was the early to mid 2000s, and the media that he was appearing in, as I said, see, all the old fans want to see Sephiroth, but in something like Kingdom Hearts or Advent Children, where he's not really a prevalent part of the story, you can't really go into all that I want to become a planet bullshit, or go into the whole I'm obsessed with my mother and I chopped off her head and took her to the center of the planet. You see how weird this sounds? So you don't really have time to really indulge people on what Sephiroth was actually about. All the old fans know what his story is, and all the new fans are just gonna be kind of put off because they probably won't understand what the guy, he's a planet? Wait, and he chopped his mom's head off? Wait, what? So, where's the happy middle ground in this? Well, you just make him evil. Give him some fiery imagery, because there was that one time in the game where he did that thing with the fire, so all the old fans can go, oh, that's like the one time he did the thing, and then all the new fans of Sephiroth can be like, man, that's really cool. And then you put One Winged Angel in there, so all the old fans can be like, oh, that's like the final boss theme, and all the new fans can be like, oh, that's awesome. And then you make him say vague pieces of dialogue like, Cloud, I'll drag you into darkness, and you'll always be mine, you're a puppet. All the old fans can be like, oh, you said he was a puppet, and it's like the one time in the game that's, oh man. And then all the new fans can be like, oh man, that's awesome, weird, vague, villainy dialogue. And through this middle ground, there comes a point where Sephiroth becomes so far removed from what he originally was, and every appearance he makes is always hitting that happy middle ground, to the point where he almost only becomes known for those specific things. All the, I want to be the planet, I'm a part of this ancient civilization, and I burned down a village and cut my mom's head off, all that stuff kind of gets lost in time. To the point where the Advent Children Kingdom Hearts, where he's just some ethereal being of darkness, becomes his entire persona, because that's the way that he's always being presented. Because in order to market as much merchandise as possible surrounding this character, you gotta be as vague with him as possible. Come around 2020 to the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Sephiroth isn't really Sephiroth anymore at all. In fact, the 2020 Final Fantasy VII Remake Sephiroth couldn't actually be any more far removed of a character than who he was in the 1997 PS1 original. These are two completely different characters. Honestly, from 1997 to 2020, these two iterations of Sephiroth are as different mentally as they are physically. The remake Sephiroth is honestly just the result of decades of obsessive and uncontrollable fandom over the character. It becomes a vicious cycle where the manic infatuation of fans infects the creators of the content as well, to the point where the property demotes itself simply into the reverence of what it is, and not who it was. I'm not innocent in this either, though. Shit, I squealed like a fucking 10-year-old girl when I saw Sephiroth slash his way into the Smash trailer, but I was pissed that they included ample songs from Final Fantasy VII, especially the original versions of the songs, except for his actual original theme music. It's a small detail that kind of lets me know how much we forget about the origins of these mascot characters. I think it goes to show that in wanting to include all this lore and cash in on all this nostalgia, not even knowing what his original theme music was, or not even caring to include that, kind of shows me, as I said, how lost in time this character's origins actually are. But I'm not really having a problem with things soaring into interstellar levels of popularity. My feelings of contention are when we forget what made the character so beloved in the first place. See, and I think this topic applies to many different things, and it's happened forever. But I guess Sephiroth is like a good small example of this, and he is my favorite video game villain and just one of my favorite fictional characters ever. And I've seen over the years sometimes backlash over people saying that Sephiroth is overrated, or he's just not that cool, and why do people like him so much? He just looks cool. And I've even heard people say he's emo, which again, if you actually play the original game, could not be further from the truth. Those types of negative feelings that people have are simply just stemming from the resentment of this exact topic of when a character overgrows itself. And again, as I said, I'm not innocent in this either. I fucking adore Sephiroth, and I love to see him on all types of different t-shirts and hats and hoodies and tattoos and in different media, and I love playing as Sephiroth in Kirby's Dream Land in Smash. I would love to see Sephiroth in Mario Kart slicing people away, bringing down meteors or some shit. I love this franchise. And it's not like Link or Mario or Pikachu, where these are more or less silent protagonists that they're meant to be catapulted throughout their respective franchises and mixed around into each other's. In their respective games, they're meant for the player to experience that world vicariously through that character. Mario always was and always has been just a guy who jumps on shit. That's it. He goes wahoo and he jumps on some shit. That's his whole thing. Pikachu is a rat that goes pika pika and a big thunderbolt comes out. Link is a guy who shatters his ankles when he falls off a cliff. When a character lasts the test of time, it's usually because they have this sort of one-trait personality that makes them relatable and lovable to almost any kind of audience. Sephiroth is a bit more niche of a character when you really look at his origin. I think for him to become as popular as a character as he was, he had to ride the wave of his aesthetics and his villainous persona, rather than the nuance of his backstory. It doesn't bother me so much that when he's in other media, he gets devolved into this more mindless, villainous persona. I wish people actually understood how complicated and kind of heartbreaking this character actually was in his origin. If you ever have the time, you should, and you haven't done so, you should play Final Fantasy VII, because it is a riveting story, and I think it is one of the best stories told in a video game. The gameplay itself doesn't hold up so great anymore. If you really want to learn what Sephiroth is about, the 2020 remake version of him, it doesn't really detail what made Sephiroth so great, so much as it just praises his iconography. Hey guys, if you watched to the end, appreciate you watching. If you haven't done so, think about subscribing and maybe liking, sharing this video, commenting, sharing your thoughts with me. And if you don't know yet, I'm a nerdy tattooer that likes tattooing nerdy things, so you should check out my Instagram and see my work.